The Hitchhiker. It was nearing midnight, and Raj was tired, trying to stay alert as he drove alone on the empty highway. He had been on the road for hours after attending a business meeting, and all he wanted was to reach home, collapse on his bed, and let the day wash away. The highway stretched before him, straight and lonely, the trees on either side casting long shadows under the dim glow of the moon. It had been ages since he had passed another car, and the quiet solitude began to feel oppressive. He reached for the radio, hoping for some music to break the silence, but all he got was static. Strange, he thought. The signal had been fine a few miles back. He switched it off and focused on the road. As the minutes passed, his eyes started to play tricks on him. The dark shapes of trees seemed to shift, and every now and then, he thought he saw something move in his peripheral vision. He shook his head and told himself it was just the exhaustion creeping in. Just as Raj began to drift into a daze, something caught his attention. In the faint beam of his headlights, he saw a figure standing by the roadside, their silhouette barely visible in the darkness. His heart skipped a beat. Who could be out here alone, this late at night? The figure appeared to be a woman, standing still, facing the road as if waiting for something. Her head was slightly tilted, her long hair covering her face. Raj slowed down instinctively, but a shiver crawled up his spine. There was something off about her. He couldn't explain it, but every instinct told him to keep driving. As he passed her, he glanced in his rearview mirror and froze. The woman was no longer by the side of the road. She was standing in the middle of the road, directly behind his car, her eyes following him, her face pale and expressionless. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He pressed the accelerator harder, forcing himself to focus on the road ahead, his heart thudding in his chest. The farther he drove, the darker the road seemed to become. The trees grew thicker, and the highway seemed to stretch on endlessly. The uneasiness lingered, growing with each passing second. He glanced back at the mirror, half expecting to see her again. But the road was empty. Just when he thought he had imagined the whole thing, a loud bang echoed from the back of his car. Startled, he swerved slightly, pulling to the side of the road. His hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. What was that? Reluctantly, Raj turned off the engine and grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment. The silence outside the car was unnerving, the night still and heavy. He stepped out into the cold, his breath visible in the chilly air. His heart pounded as he cautiously approached the back of the car, shining the flashlight around. Nothing. No damage, no sign of anything unusual. But then, just as he bent down to check the tires, he felt it. A presence behind him. He whipped around, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. There was no one there, but he could feel it like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. He was not alone. Raj's throat was dry as he hurried back to the car, his footsteps quickening. He slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors, his hands trembling as he fumbled to start the engine. But as he turned the key, he heard something. A whisper. "Take me home." Raj froze, his blood turning to ice. He slowly turned his head, looking into the rearview mirror. There, in the back seat, was the woman. Her face was ghostly pale, her hair hanging in tangled strands, her eyes hollow and dark. She stared at him through the mirror, her lips barely moving as she repeated, "Take me home." Raj's heart raced, his mind screaming at him to get out of the car, but his body refused to move. He was paralyzed with fear, locked in her gaze. The air inside the car grew colder, and his breath fogged the glass. The woman leaned forward, her face drawing closer to his. "Take me home." Raj's body finally responded, and he slammed his foot on the gas, the car lurching forward as the tires screeched. He drove like a man possessed, his eyes darting between the road and the mirror. But no matter how fast he drove, the woman remained in the back seat, her eerie chant growing louder. "Take me home. Take me home." Panic surged through him. His mind raced with thoughts of escape, but where could he go? The highway stretched on, endless and empty. He glanced at the fuel gauge, it was dangerously low. He couldn't keep driving much longer. Up ahead, Raj spotted a gas station, its neon sign flickering weakly in the distance. Relief washed over him as he pulled into the lot and parked the car. The station looked old and deserted, but he didn't care. He just needed to get out of the car, away from her. Raj jumped out of the car and backed away, breathing heavily. He glanced at the back seat through the window. Empty. Had he imagined it? The woman, the whispers, had it all been some kind of waking nightmare brought on by exhaustion? As he stood there, trying to catch his breath, a voice broke the silence. Late night for a drive, huh? Raj spun around to see the gas station attendant, an old man with a worn cap, leaning against the door of the station. His eyes were dark and sunken, but there was a strange gleam in them. Why, yeah, Raj stammered. Just needed some fuel. The old man nodded slowly, his gaze drifting toward the car. Strange things happen on this highway, you know, he said, his voice low. Lots of folks pick up things they shouldn't. Raj felt a chill crawl up his spine. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words died in his throat when the old man pointed toward his car. There she is again, the attendant said, his voice barely a whisper. Raj's heart stopped as he turned to look at his car. The woman was sitting in the back seat, staring out at him, her cold, dead eyes locking with his. Take me home,